Amen. All right. Now, we ready for a word? Yes, we will close our series on Ruth today. On Ruth. Stand with me and turn to Ruth chapter 4. Ruth chapter 4. We're going to begin at verse 11. We'll read 11 verses in your hearing today. Ruth chapter 4. Our series is entitled Ancient Families. Ancient families, how our modern families can learn from some great ancient principles and ancient people. Ruth chapter 4. If you've been here, you know I'm getting ready to read from my own version. Amen. Here we go. Ruth chapter 4, verse 11. And all the people within the gate and the elders said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman that goes into your house like Rachel and like Leah, who both built the house of Israel, and make you strong in Ephrathah, and call out your name in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, that Tamar birthed for Judah, from the seed that the Lord will give to this young woman." And Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her. The Lord granted to her a pregnancy, and she birthed a son. And the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, that did not cause you to fail in being redeemed this day, and his name be proclaimed within Israel. And he shall be to you the cause of your life to return, and nourish your gray hair. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, has given birth, since she is better to you than 7 sons." And Naomi took the child and placed him within her bosom, and became a nurse for him. And the neighborhood women proclaimed to him a name, saying, "There has been a son born to Naomi." And they proclaimed his name Obed. His father, he was the father of Jesse, the father of David. And now these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron, and Hezron fathered Ram, and Ram fathered Amminadab. And Amminadab fathered Nahshon, and Nahshon fathered Salmon, and Salmon fathered Boaz, and Boaz fathered Obed, and Obed fathered Jesse, and Jesse fathered David. Here we go. I want to tag this text with this title: God can bless your mess. You may be seated. God can. I already know. I hear you. Can. I did say it appropriately. Bless your mess. I know what you grew up hearing. I know what you even taught my generation and younger. I know. It's a sentiment that we have said that has become cliche and adage that our mothers and mothers' mothers and mothers' mothers' mothers said. I know. And it was that God can't bless mess, that he will not. And it was a reality. Here's what it was. It was a push of conviction to not think that you can live however you want to live, and that God will approve it. It was the challenge that I agree with. It was the challenge to monitor how you build your life if you expect God to bless your life. The bottom line was this: don't think you can abuse grace and get away with it. It was just the African-American version of the sentiment that Paul had to the church at Rome. When Rome, he is trying to teach them about sin and suffering and salvation and the beauty of grace. And then in Romans chapter 6, verses 1 through 2, Paul says this: "What shall we say then? Shall we go on sinning so that grace may increase? By no means. We are those who have died to sin. How can we live in it any longer?" So hear me when I say God can bless your mess. Hear me. This isn't an issue of your present activity of sin. But what I am suggesting is the present powerful activity despite your sin. Come close. Hear me well. Let me land right now. I know God can bless mess because God bless me. Maybe I'm by myself. I'll preach it to myself too. That God bless me. I am not a mess because I am specifically or actively or consistently participating in some egregious sin. But I am a mess because I can look back over my own life and see what I did do and didn't do, where I did go and I shouldn't have gone, what I have said and what I should not have said. And then I woke up this morning with breath in my body and realized that God still bless me. And somebody in here knows that they were a mess. I can't be by myself. Somebody in here knows that your life was a mess and God still took care of you, that you haven't made all of the best decisions or gone through all of the right motions, and yet God looked beyond each and every one of our faults and still met our needs. Do I have a witness in here that say, God still blessed me? Now, here's the reality. Let's unpack why I say we're a mess. It's important. We're a mess because, unfortunately, our flesh is. Our flesh is a mess. And because our flesh is a mess, subsequently, our families have become a mess. The consequence of a myriad of messy realities has produced messy families. And so now we have a large and an amalgam of what we can call now blended families. I want to make sure I talk about that today. Blended families. What do I mean? My wife has gone through several blenders and juicers over the last several years because she likes to take all of these seemingly random ingredients, the spinach and the kale and the fruit and the flaxseed and the protein powder and the stevia and the water, and put it in the blender. And I ain't gonna lie, most of them ingredients are nasty by themselves, but when she puts it in the blender and mixes it up, it still looks nasty. On the outside, it's green and funny looking, but if you give it a chance, it's delicious and healthy. I hope you see where I'm going, that God can bless what we've had to blend. That even if your family is a mix and myriad of different pieces from different pasts and different situations, it may look different to the naked eye, but it can still be a blessing. It's important we talk about this because according to the U.S. Census Bureau, 16% of our children live in blended families. 1,300 new step families, watch me, are formed every day. To the point that as of 2023, 40%, almost half of the families in these United States are blended, with at least one partner having a child from a previous relationship before the current marriage. Blended families need love too. And when I say blended, I mean all kind of blended. Adopted parent, foster parent, second marriage, previous kid, that God can still bless it. Now, we need to understand why. Why do I say it's a mess? Well, it's a mess because it's a mess because of man's damage to God's plan. I'm an honest preacher. We got to talk about this. It's man's damage to God's plan, because the God's plan, God intended for a man and a woman to leave their father and mother, to be united into one flesh, and then to reproduce in the earth, representing the Creator who made everything perfect in his image. That's Genesis 1. That's Genesis 2. That's Ephesians 5. That's Matthew 7. That's Bible. One man, one woman to come together, and they would reproduce. And that was damaged when Adam and Eve decided to do whatever they wanted to do. Cain then kills Abel, and the rest is history. Families have been falling apart and trying to put themselves back together for centuries. Now, that's not the big one. Here's the real problem, though. The real problem is not only man's damage to God's plan, but man's decisions to give pain. What do I mean? You know what I mean. This is what we call it. We call it baby mama, baby daddy, grandmama, auntie drama. That's what we call it. We call it in-law drama. We call it you hurt me, and so now I hurt you. You hurt me, and now I'll hurt you, and I'll hurt you to the point that I'll use these kids against you. Here's the truth, that regardless, though, of how we landed in the position that we've landed in, we don't have to stay right there. That can I remind you that where you are is not where you have to stay. That your present reality does not have to be your eternal destiny. It does not have to be your end, especially with your family. And here we are at the end of Ruth. Ruth is getting ready to bless us because we get a look into a blended family. Ruth is not biologically Naomi's daughter, but she's still with her, marries a distant relative of Naomi to give Naomi a redeemer and Ruth a life. And this beautiful ending to a story gives us a lens on how we can steward our families, whether you have a traditional family, whether you're a single parent, and if even you are a blended family. God can bless mess. That your messy family can get a miracle. Here we go. Let's work. First, God will bless in the correction of your past. He will correct your past. That God can use your present reality of family as a means to redeem the past situations of our families. It's in the text. Ruth chapter 4, verse 11 says this. And all the people within the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman that goes into your house like Rachel and Leah, who both built the house of Israel, and make you strong in Epaphrathah and call out your name, okay, in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, that Tamar birthed for Judah, from the seed that the Lord would give to this young woman. The witnesses at the gate. Boaz has gone to the gate, he sat down, and the witnesses who have admired this transaction of Boaz securing the property from Elimelech and securing the property from Naomi, they pronounce a blessing over Boaz and Ruth's marriage. And when they pronounce the blessing, watch the text, they say, bless them like Rachel and Leah. Like Leah and Rachel. Let Ruth be like Leah and Rachel. Now, this may seem odd based on the history of these women because Jacob didn't necessarily want Leah. He wanted Rachel, but he got Leah first. So why would you say that? Well, Genesis teaches us in Genesis 38 about Leah and Rachel, that Leah was the oldest. She was first. Rachel was second. The writer of Ruth opens the story very similarly, because when the writer of Ruth, if you remember, opens, it tells us about these two women, Orpah and Ruth. Ruth was second. Ruth is the second named woman in the story. A few verses up, if you've been tracking with me these weeks, in chapter 4, we just revealed her as Mahlon's wife. Mahlon was the second son. So not only is Ruth a foreigner, but she was second. Okay, let me help you understand this. In Hebrew listing, to be listed last was also to be listed least. It was about her ranking in the hierarchy of this family. You understand this when you read about David when he's anointed. This is why Jesse's like, well, there is another son out there in the field, because David was least in rank. The one who was second was least also received the greatest reward. The one who was last in her past is now getting the best reward in her future. The blessing corrected the reality of her past. It ought to remind us of Jesus' admonishment to the crowd in Matthew chapter 19 and in Matthew chapter 20 in regard to their position and status and hierarchy when he says the last shall be first and the first shall be last. Because the pain of our past is often the reason why our families may have fallen apart. The pain of our past is often the reason why we now have a blended family. But can I encourage somebody in here that God can take you from a low, a least, a last, and a left out position and raise you up and give you the best reward? That God can look at you and see how society has seen you and says they can look at you however they want to. But when you're my child, I can pick you up and place you in a position that no man can touch. Watch how the women keep going though. They go on, they say, Boaz, may you be strong. That's what the text says. They want Boaz to be strong. Some translations say, may you be fertile. May you have virility. Okay. Another translation would say, may you have standing. May you have wealth. What you got to understand about Hebrew culture is wealth and kids meant the same thing. Okay? And so they are pronouncing a blessing that they want Ruth and Boaz not to be known for their past or what they didn't have, but they're pronouncing a blessing that they would be known for their status and their worth. That Ruth and Naomi and Boaz are getting their statuses corrected. I'm going to tell you why. Because if you remember, when Naomi comes back to Bethlehem, she changes her name to Mara. She changes her name to bitter because she felt worthless. And at the end of the story, God is correcting it. That he is moving her from bitter to better. That Ruth was also a foreigner with no family, and now she's getting a family and a fortune she never saw coming. Boaz is old. We have no mention of an heir, and now he's getting more than he even thought to ask for. The women say the blessing is about being like Tamar and Judah. What does that have to do? This has to do with the age of conception, because Judah was an old man when him and Tamar had Perez. Judah was significantly older because Tamar was actually the wife of his sons. Boaz has no kids, y'all. Here's something that we miss, that Ruth has been barren 10 years. The Bible says that she lived in Moab with Mahlon 10 years before Mahlon died, and they never had any children. She's been barren 10 years, and now she gets remarried, and she immediately has a kid. Hear me well, because listen to me, that God can give in the next what you were unable to produce in your last. And I'm not just talking physically for kids, but I need some people in here to know that God can take your redo and your do-over. God can take your remarriage and your blended family. God can take your new posture in life and give you now what you were unable to get back then. God can give you now what you were unable to produce in your last. That God has grace enough to correct. He has grace enough to reframe and reshape what has been messed up, or even what life took from us. That Ruth and Boaz and Naomi didn't even ask for this, and yet God is blessing them in the midst of it. He's correcting their past. Here we go. Secondly, this messy blessing, though, requires committed acceptance. It requires committed acceptance. In order for blended families to work, or for any family to work, there needs to be committed acceptance. Long-term committed acceptance. Ruth 4 verse 13 says, and Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her. The Lord granted to her a pregnancy, and she birthed a son. And the women said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord that did not cause you to fail, and being redeemed this day, and his name be proclaimed within Israel. Text says, Boaz took Ruth and went into her. Take means to enter her chamber. It also means to enter her. And the tense of the verb is immediate. That means as soon as they said, I do, they went and consummated this marriage. Please understand why that's important. Because Boaz knows what it means to have a child with Ruth. You're not understanding what I mean. Let me teach you Jewish social culture. This is important because he knows that when I sleep with her, if we have a kid, that the baby that is born is not mine. He's got to sleep with her knowing that whatever comes out of that womb is not technically for her. And he is willing to take her and do it anyhow. He has accepted her and who comes with her. Because going into Ruth's chamber also meant going into Naomi's care. And it also meant caring for a child of another covenant. Because the first child that they had would be the Redeemer. It would be the child to redeem the line of Elimelech and Naomi and Mahlon. Even though the child is biologically his, the child is covenantally Mahlon's. I need you to stay with me. In other words, the son that is born is equally Naomi's and Elimelech's as it is Ruth's and Boaz. That means that this child has two sets of parents. The child has double paternity. And here's what's important for us to get. They don't have a problem with this. Circumstances have caused things to be the way they are, and nobody is tripping. They are just grateful that there is going to be a son. Because the only way your family will make it, especially when your blended family exists, is first you got to realize it is what it is. Let's just be real. Can we have a therapy session? It is what it is. I know it hurts. I know you didn't expect them to leave you. I know you didn't want them to pass away. I know you expected more. You didn't plan this. You wanted things to be different. I get that. But it is what it is. And the blessing is when the child can make it. And so whether it's 2 parents or 1 parent or 3 parent or 4 parent or 24 parents, the child needs to win. Mr. So-and-so rejected the whole idea of this. He was like, nah, bruh, if these people come with this property, I don't want that. But Boaz makes a decision to take it all. He takes the property, he takes Ruth, he takes the mother-in-law that isn't really his mother-in-law, he takes the baby that according to the culture would not be his baby. He takes it all because a healthy family, and especially a healthy blended family, has to take it all. You quiet on me today. I'm going to preach it anyhow. There is no family buffet line. You don't get to show up and pick the parts of a family that you want to keep and the parts you want to put away. These my kids and these her kids. No, it don't work like that. When you take them, you take all of them. I'm sorry, I ain't preaching what I learned. I'm preaching what I know. You got to take it all. You have to pick all of them. That God didn't pick the pieces of you he liked and throw the rest away. How dare you think that you can do the same thing? Okay. Our family, I was born into a blended family. And I have one. It is what it is. Most of you know that, but I'm going to stand on this. And I'm not necessarily projecting my family's language onto you. But for me, the way we were raised, the way Tony and Deidre and Ralph were raised, the way Orion and Eden were raised, is that steps are something you walk on. And there are no half people. I'm sorry, I'm going to talk my talk today. Steps are something you walk on. And there are no half people. Period, the end. It is the notion that regardless of who birthed us or where we lived or the circumstances, we are all family. We all take pictures and plan parties and show up. I ain't had holidays with everybody. And I'm not saying it didn't take work to get there, but I'm saying that I loved God and my family enough to work to get it there. Here's the reality. Boaz didn't call another meeting at the gate. He didn't say, cool, and then go back to the gate with the same 10 men and the same 10 elders and say, all right, now about this kid, let's talk about visitation. He didn't show up back at the gate and say, hey, if this is Naomi's redeemer, would a child stay in Naomi's tent or would a child stay in my tent? No, they just decided to love anyhow. It was a committed acceptance. I'm almost done. Here we go. Thirdly, this messy blessing needs communal responsibility. Communal responsibility. It corrects the past, committed acceptance, but communal responsibility. Here's something I need you to get today, dads, moms. Here's what I need you to get today. You can't make it on your own. You all know, like I know, that we grew up hearing it takes a village, that you need communal responsibility. And so whether you are a traditional family or a single dad or a single mom or a blended family, you need a community. In verse 14 of the text, watch what the text says. The text says, they said, the Lord has not failed in redeeming her. In verse 17, they said, a son has been born to Naomi. The text says, the witnesses. The text says, the women praise and celebrate what is happening. They are celebrating the birth of the lad. Can we stop here? And can I remind you that Naomi says she lost her lads in chapter 1 and she gets a lad back in chapter 4? I ain't got time to mess with that, but she gets her lad back and the women celebrate. They go so far in celebrating with Naomi that they participate in naming the child. Girl, what you gonna name him? I think you ought to name him John. No, we don't like John, girl. How about we name him Jacob? Nah, we already got it, Jacob. We gonna name him Obed, which is short for Obadiah. A servant of God. Obed meaning to serve. May he serve you, Naomi. May this lad serve you. The women participate in naming. Notice, though, here's what I want you to get, that in the text, the same women from chapter 1 are the same women in chapter 4. That when Naomi returns home to Bethlehem in chapter 1, the women show up to it. Hey, girl, it's so good to see you. Naomi's home, y'all. And Naomi says, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, because the Lord has afflicted me. What's wrong with Naomi? But notice, these same women are still here in chapter 4. I need you to get it. That Naomi, the same women who were with her in her time of pain in chapter 1, are also there in her time of praise in chapter 4. Listen, this is intentionally poetic from the Hebrew writer, but it is powerful and it is practical for us because we won't be healthy, happy, or holy without strong community. You need people who are there in your pain and there with you to praise. You need people who are there when you're down and people who are there when you're up. You need people who understand what you're dealing with in regard to the makeup and the work that your family takes, because it's different, especially blended families. Holla at me when opinions and operations from outside your house affect your house. Not everyone can understand that. This is why you need a community, single dad. This is why you need a community, single mom, because you need people who understand the pain and the trouble that that you're dealing with, so that also when that child graduates, God help me, when that child gets married, when that life changes for you, you got some people who will celebrate with you. It's the reality. You need a community. My wife and I have some friends that we talk to once a week. Once a week. We have to skip a week. It is what it is. But once a week, who share our reality, our exact reality as a family. And they have the ability to check us when our expectations are unrealistic. And they also are there to comfort us when our effort is not rewarded. They are there when we have pain, and they are there when we want to praise. You need a community in your pain, and a community when you get promise. Because when you consider what you lost, when you consider everything you go through for this family, when you consider everything it took to get that child through school or to graduation or in life, you need some people with you in your praise who remember what you went through in your pain. And so you need a community. Here we go. God can bless a mess. It's a mess, I know, because he blessed me. My family has been a mess, and he has blessed it. And this blessing has been the correction of past. It requires committed acceptance. It needs communal responsibility. And finally, it is a commendable reward. It is a commendable reward. God help me. Ruth chapter 4, verse 15 says, "And he shall be to you the cause of your life to return, and nourish your gray hair. For your daughter-in-law who loves you has given birth. She is better to you than 7 sons." It is a commendable reward. Because it's commendable because this blessing involves returning. The text tells us that Naomi's life returned. The verb usage is the same verb that is used for Naomi and Ruth in chapter 1 when they returned back to Bethlehem. They returned to Bethlehem when they heard that the Lord had provided bread. And now the Bible says Naomi's life has returned back to her. In other words, that she returned down, and now God is raising her up. That Ruth, who was family, who is now no longer family, decided to stay her family and is essentially returning life back to her family. That the Lord then brings a resolve to this return. That she thought she was returning to a life of brokenness when God had a plan of blessing in this blending. And the blessing is so good, church. It's so good that the women say Ruth is better than 7 sons. You need to understand why this is important. 7 or 10, Brother Green, were the ideal number of children in the Old Testament. God help me today, though. Help me, Lord, no. 7 or 10, God bless y'all. 7 or 10 was the ideal number. Now, I can prove it though, right? When Elkanah sees Hannah crying, he says, "Aren't I better to you than 10 sons?" You see it with Job. Job had 7 sons and 3 daughters, 10 kids. In Job 42, when his life is redeemed, he has 7 more sons and 3 more daughters, because 7 and 10 was the ideal number for children. Hear how powerful this is. But Ruth, by herself, was better than the ideal number of offspring for Naomi. In other words, the child that was not her own was better than 10 biological children of her own. I just helped somebody, whether you want to admit it or not. The child that was not biologically hers ended up being better than 10 biological children she could have on her own. Because God can take the children and the family and the blend that you never saw coming and make it better than what you thought you could get on your own. The blessing is not only about a returning for Naomi, it is also about a receiving for Ruth and Boaz. Because the people are saying, let the foreign woman, let the Moabite, let Ruth, who is coming into his house, produce like Leah, like Rachel, and like Tamar. They give her 3 women. They say, let her pop these jokers out. Like Leah and Rachel. They say it so much. They say like Leah and Rachel, who with both of their hands built the nation of Israel. Like Tamar, who built this line. They are remembering how God blessed these barren and left out women and gave them kids. That's what I want you to understand. That tells us then that Ruth didn't have a son. That in the history of her life, she had kids. I need you to get it. She just didn't have one son that even though we don't know their names, the text is telling us she had multiple children. That means that Boaz didn't just get a son, that he got multiple children. Oh, God, help me in here. Okay. We may say, why would Boaz do this? What is this? What is up with God and Boaz for Boaz to do this? I will shout by myself. This is so good. Boaz is the bomb, y'all, because we got to remember who Boaz is. You got to remember who Boaz's parents are. The text tells us, right? The text says that Perez had Hezron, and Hezron had Ram, and Ram had Aminadab, and Aminadab had Nahshon, and Nahshon had Salmon, and Salmon had Boaz. Boaz's daddy is Salmon. You ain't getting it. Okay. The book of Ruth is written in the time that the judges judge. That means it's written when the book of Judges was also written. There's a book that precedes Judges, though. That book is called Joshua. You know Joshua. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho. Come on, I'm trying to help y'all. Okay, what happened at Jericho? Joshua sent 2 spies into Jericho. He sent 2 spies because Joshua himself had been a spy in the promised land. And so he sent 2 spies in the promised land. The 2 spies get there and they meet this woman. They meet this woman named Rahab. Rahab the prostitute. Rahab the foreigner. Rahab with the past. Rahab, the least and the lost and the left out. Rahab, the seductress who would give the military men a little time away when they needed it. Rahab, the prostitute whose brothel was in the wall. You're not getting it. They have a conversation with the spies. Rahab says, remember me. I know who your God is. I know what God is going to do. Please remember me when y'all come in this land. And the spies say, sis, we got you. Tie this scarlet cord out the window. And when we come in, everybody in your house will be saved. I'm trying to help y'all understand this Bible. They go in, and the text says Joshua has another conversation with these spies. And one of them is named Salmon. And the Bible says that Salmon takes a wife, and her name is Rahab. You still not getting it. Rahab the prostitute. Rahab the seductress. Rahab the foreigner who had the brothel in the wall, who gave the men a little edge off when they didn't want to go home. Rahab the foreigner marries Salmon the spy. And Rahab and Salmon have a son named Boaz. Oh no, you still not getting it. That's all right. Boaz's mama was a prostitute. Boaz's mama was a foreigner. Boaz's mama was a woman from another field and another faith who decided to make God her God, and she had a son named Boaz. And Boaz said, well, if God can do it for my mama, If God can do it for my daddy, then surely he can do it for me. No, I'm just looking for some saints now who can say, I can look back on Father's Day and say, if God can keep me in the midst of that, if God can do it for my mama, if God can do it for my daddy, then surely God can do it for me. It's a commendable reward. I'm done. It's a commendable reward. I'm done. God, hold me up. The storyteller, when he writes Ruth, the storyteller, he opens the narrative. He opens the narrative literally. The storyteller says, in the days that the judges judged. When the Hebrew writer closes the narrative, he closes the narrative with the name David. He opens the book and says, in the day of the judges. But he closes the book with the name David. He opens the book by reminding us that this is the days when Israel had no king, and that everyone did what was right in their own eyes. But he closes the book with the name of the greatest king. His name was David, who was a man after God's own heart. The book starts with people doing whatever they wanted to do. Not for all of us, but for some of us. That's why we have blended families. Because we started out doing whatever we thought was good in our eyes. For some of us, even if it's not a part of your family, that's why you have drama, because you did whatever was right in your own eyes. But the book began as people who did whatever they wanted because they had no king. But it closes with naming the greatest king. The book began as people who did what they wanted, and it closed with people who sought after God. And Boaz's name is in this list of getting us to this greatest king. He is rewarded as being the progenitor, the protector, the provider of the person that leads us to David. Can I tell you, I'm done, that your blended family can be a producer of world changers. Can I tell you right now that the kid in your seat right now, can I tell you those kids in that chapel can be world changers? If you're willing to pray and believe and parent enough, I'm here to tell you that these kids can forever shake the earth, because this lineage is not simply, Pastor, the lineage of David. This lineage is also the lineage of Jesus. God, thank you right now. This is the lineage of Jesus. Boaz is also a great grandparent to Jesus. You say, why is that powerful? Because Jesus had a blended family. Jesus is the Son of God and the son of Mary, but Jesus is also the son of Joseph. He is Christ with God, but he's a carpenter with Joseph. He's God and he's man. He's a son of double paternity, and I'm so grateful for that son of double paternity, because he looked at all my mess and looked at all my mistakes and looked at all my mishaps, and he took it and died just for me. And I'm so grateful that we serve a God who understands everything that we've been through, everything that we're facing, every challenge of our family, and says, I can still bless your mess. I can go to the cross and take all of your trouble and nail it there. I can take all of your past and pain and still give you a blessing. That the Lord can bless me despite me. This son of double paternity was willing to take all of my faults, all of my failures, and all of my flaws, and still give me a future. I know y'all ready to go to brunch, but I'm so grateful to a God. I'm sorry. I'm so grateful to a God that is the God of another chance. That says, if you're willing to trust me and hold to my unchanging hand, I can do more for you in the next than you thought you lost back then. I can do more for you in the future and in the lineage of your children and your children's children than you ever thought possible. Because we serve a God who redeems, who restores, who reconciles. We serve a God who can take what we have and make it better than 7 or 10 sons. What does that mean for us? That thing that you thought you had to have, that blessing that you thought was dire and important and necessary, that God can take what you have in your hands, what you have in your life, and make it even better than what you thought possible. Why? Because he came down and suffered and died just for you. God, I thank you today